For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dhlamini. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
Recently, Ismail Lagadin wrote an article. First of all, he's a well-known veteran and journalist. He wrote an article in the Daily Maverick that was titled, "I have no faith in SA's future." What do you think his article, do you think his article captures the feelings of a lot of people, and what do you think about it?
Yes, I think a lot of people think the country is going to the dogs and there's no way out of this, and they say, I feel very depressed or very distressed, and it's very hard to deal with this sort of sentiment. And what Ismail Lagadin did there is he tried to go beyond gossip. He tried to give some examples from other countries, like Guyana, for example, of how there was increasing corruption, patronage, and people who had skills left the country, and he has statistics there of very high proportion of a quite small population are actually outside the country. And he gives an example of a few other countries, and he hints that there can be increasing attacks on minorities, increasing authoritarianism, and a lot of the sentiments seem to be borne out. If you look at the media today, South African Airways may well be technically bankrupt. There seems to have been a lot of irregularities in the way they do things. The chair of SAA apparently is close to President Zuma, and doesn't seem to be possible to stop her from doing what she's doing. The same happens with SABC. And when someone says something is going to the dogs, usually one responds by saying, well, look, we've got the best educational system in the continent, we've wiped out illiteracy, our healthcare system is this, that, and the other. But the problem is that there have been some very impressive gains made since 1994, but some of these have actually been eroded. For example, education, conventional education. We may be one of the bottom countries on this continent. It's better in places. The educational facilities in some of these countries seem to be better than here, and they don't seem to have any sense of duty towards their tasks. For example, the fact that they are repealing a ruling of the court to the effect that they have to supply textbooks they haven't supplied textbooks to 100% of pupils in Limpopo, and they say you can't expect perfection. But the Constitution says education is a right. It's not a right that must be progressively realized as we get resources. It's a right today. And so you have a situation where not only are there's actually regression in many respects, but there's a sense that the country is deteriorating. We have a situation where they say business confidence at its lowest. The rand has almost lost about 80% of its value in the last 18 months. There's practically no investment, etc., etc., etc. Now, my personal feeling is I am reluctant to accept that everything is lost, which is the theme of Ismail Lagardin's article, which is really, we are on this downward trajectory. There is no way that we can return and revive the dynamism which people hoped to see in South African democracy. The way I would approach it is that if you take a journey and you go off the highway by mistake, you then have to ask yourself, where am I now? How did I get here? What was the mistake I made to get where I am? How do I get back onto the highway? Now, when you get back onto the highway, you may decide that there are better ways of going to the destination. And even the destination, you may have learned things which tell you that the destination can be better if you go to XYZ. Now, it's the same with the country. If you look at, we used to look at Zimbabwe, and people would say, well, Zimbabwe's gone to the dogs. But the way I used to argue it is to say, look, what was the character of the Zimbabwean African nationalist movement? And it was a very militaristic one. And one of the things that we can learn is that you really need to have continual political education, political discussion, etc., etc. Now, South Africa I used to contrast with Zimbabwe, and what we're finding now is there is not a lot of political discussion. If you look at the COSATU Congress, the ANC congresses that we've had in the recent time, it's all been about who gets what position and things like this. It's not been about ideas, about directions. You don't have a citizenry that is involved. So I don't have a solution to where we are. But what I think is we really need to have a common understanding of what are the problems. Do we all agree that the problems are X or Y? And I think we will see the problem is not going to be solved just by Zuma going. The problems will need certain steps to rectify them. And I think while a lot of people will not commit themselves to achieving socialism, let's say, there's a lot of people who will be prepared to agree we must end the corruption, we must end the violence, because there was this thing on ENCA where some ordinary family was being terrorized by the police and tortured. Now, that can happen to anyone. People want those things to stop. And I think we can start in limited ways, and I am reluctant. This is my country. I'm not going to emigrate to some other place. In any case, immigration is only open to some people who have certain skills and you can get into other countries and all of that. And those of us who have no intention of leaving, I don't think Lagardin has any intention of leaving, those of us who have no intention of leaving have to get together, concerned citizens, and try to see things step by step, try to remedy things. But I don't have a magic bullet.
Now, who or what political force do you think is going to lead SA onto a new future?
You see, the problem that we have is that people are unhappy with the ANC, but I don't think that DA has got it right. They've got a black leader, but people still see them as a white party. They still think that if the DA were to take control of Gauteng, it would be recolonization, as people refer to the Western Cape as being a sort of a colony. And I think it's partly a joke, but it's partly that they do believe that even though the ANC has not done things that they like, the ANC is more sympathetic to the poor. I think it seems to be they're getting less and less sympathetic to the poor. But the DA definitely is not sympathetic to the poor. It's very anti-poor in its policies in the Western Cape, places like that. And they stress things like merit and efficiency, and I think we do need that. But merit and efficiency are code words for whites in the eyes of many people, and they feel that they are excluded. You have the EFF, which is strong on rhetoric. We don't know whether they can be relied on. So what I believe needs to be done is faith-based organizations, business people, ordinary citizens in a number of spheres need to come together and discuss what are the main issues they would like to remedy and develop for the retrieving of the promise of 1994, which so many of us invested in.
Thank you, Professor. That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Crema Media's Polity about where to in SA politics.